In a stunning escalation that has shaken the geopolitical landscape, the United States launched a massive overnight aerial assault targeting Iran's most fortified nuclear research and military installations, a move that former President Donald Trump hailed as a spectacular success. The strike, executed with ruthless precision, involved an orchestrated wave of stealth bombers, hypersonic cruise missiles, and satellite-guided munitions aimed at dismantling what U.S. intelligence claims were operational components of Iran's secretive nuclear weapons infrastructure. For months, satellite imagery and intercepted communications had signaled heightened activity near key Iranian sites, including Natanz, Arak, and Fordow. According to the Pentagon, these facilities housed advanced centrifuge arrays and enrichment labs that were approaching weapons-grade uranium levels, directly violating the terms of international non-proliferation agreements. As the dust settled, infrared footage revealed smoking craters, collapsed bunkers, and charred remains of surface-to-air missile launchers meant to protect these installations. Trump, addressing a charged crowd at a late-night press conference, declared the operation a monumental blow against tyranny. He emphasized that the action was not only defensive, but a proactive measure to eliminate a growing threat to U.S. allies in the region, particularly Israel and Saudi Arabia. He praised the U.S. military's coordination, highlighting that no American casualties occurred despite Iran's retaliatory attempts to intercept the offensive. "We acted with resolve, speed, and unmatched strength," Trump said, standing in front of a backdrop of American flags. "This sends a message to every rogue regime on Earth. If you threaten peace, America will be your reckoning." Iran's leadership, however, painted a drastically different picture. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei condemned the assault as a blatant act of war and vowed swift retribution. State media outlets displayed images of wounded civilians, damaged nearby infrastructure, and funerals held in towns close to the impact zones. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, launched a barrage of missiles toward American bases in Iraq and Syria in retaliation, while vowing a shadow war of prolonged cyber attacks and asymmetric operations against American interests worldwide. Iranian Foreign Minister Amir Abdollahian called for an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, accusing Washington of violating international law, sovereignty, and the moral conscience of mankind. Global response has been swift and divided. NATO allies, including the United Kingdom and France, have urged both sides to de-escalate and called for immediate diplomatic talks, though they stopped short of outright condemnation of the U.S. strike. Russia and China, longtime strategic partners of Iran, harshly criticized the American action, with Russian President Vladimir Putin warning of irreparable damage to regional stability. China echoed the sentiment, warning that continued U.S. aggression could spiral into an uncontrollable conflict involving multiple nations and possibly triggering global economic disruptions. Oil prices surged within hours of the attack, with Brent crude reaching a two-year high, and markets across Europe and Asia tumbling amid investor panic. Back in Washington, political reactions were predictably polarized. Republican leaders rallied behind Trump, praising the strike as a long-overdue demonstration of American strength and resolve in the face of Iranian defiance. Senator Lindsey Graham called it a surgical masterpiece that restores American deterrence. Democrats, however, raised alarms over the lack of congressional consultation prior to the operation. Senator Bernie Sanders labeled it an unconstitutional act of aggression and warned that Trump was dragging the nation into another endless war for personal glory. Civil society groups protested across several American cities, demanding transparency and urging restraint before the situation devolves into full-scale war. Analysts are now debating the strategic calculus behind the U.S. strike. Some argue it was a tactical move designed to cripple Iran's nuclear timeline by several years, giving diplomats breathing room to renegotiate a broader deal. Others believe it may have been a political gambit, timed to shift public attention ahead of upcoming elections, rallying nationalist sentiment under the guise of preemptive defense. What remains clear, however, is that the region now stands on the brink, with Iran threatening to exit the Non-Proliferation Treaty and reactivating its suspended missile programs, and with Israel reportedly placed on its highest alert level. The Middle East is entering a new, more dangerous phase of uncertainty. Adding further complexity is the cyber dimension of this conflict. Within hours of the bombing, Iranian-backed hacker groups claimed responsibility for large-scale cyber attacks on American banking systems, government websites, and power grids in several states. While the Department of Homeland Security confirmed unusual activity on critical infrastructure networks, it stopped short of attributing the breaches directly to Iran. Experts warn that modern warfare is no longer confined to the battlefield. It now extends to servers, satellites, and even social media platforms where state-sponsored misinformation can shape global narratives in real time. As dawn broke over Tehran, air raid sirens continued to wail, and the streets bore the haunting silence of an anxious population. Schools and businesses remained closed, and citizens queued at gas stations, fearing further escalation. Iranian TV channels aired continuous coverage of the damage, interspersed with patriotic songs and defiant speeches. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem and Riyadh, citizens were being advised to seek shelter and remain alert, amid fears that Iranian proxies such as Hezbollah or Houthis might retaliate by opening new fronts in Lebanon or Yemen. While both Washington and Tehran exchange fierce rhetoric, back-channel negotiations are reportedly underway via intermediaries in Oman, Qatar, and Switzerland. These quiet diplomatic efforts aim to prevent the crisis from spiraling into a broader regional war, though neither side is yet willing to publicly soften its stance. International organizations including the UN, EU, and Red Cross have mobilized to assess humanitarian fallout, as initial reports suggest dozens of civilian casualties and major infrastructure damage across several Iranian provinces. As the world watches closely, one thing is certain. This strike, and the political messaging that followed, marks a defining moment in 21st century geopolitics. Whether it becomes the catalyst for renewed negotiations or the trigger for all-out war, only time will tell. For now, the world holds its breath, hoping that the spectacular success celebrated in Washington does not become a global catastrophe in disguise.